All right, let's talk about sourdough. If you've ever dreamt of pulling one of those perfect, crusty loaves out of your oven, but got totally smoked by the whole starter thing, you've come to the right place. We are going to break down exactly what's going on in that bubbly jar and make it way less intimidating. Okay, let's just get this out of the way first. It's the number one fear, right? You peer into the back of your fridge and you find that starter you forgot about for weeks. There's some dark liquid on top, it smells interesting, and your first thought is, well, that's it, I killed it. But what if I told you it's almost certainly not dead? So, to understand why your starter is so incredibly tough, we have to look at what's actually living inside that jar. Because it's not just flour and water. Nope. It's something way, way cooler. What you have there is a living community. Seriously, it's a tiny, bustling ecosystem of wild yeasts and good bacteria all working together in harmony. You're not just following a recipe, you're basically cultivating life. So who are these little guys doing all the heavy lifting? They're microscopic organisms, wild yeasts and bacteria that are already hanging out in the flour. When you add water, you're just waking them up. They start munching on the sugars in the flour, and as they do, they burp out carbon dioxide, that's what makes your bread rise, and acids, which give you that signature tangy sourdough flavor. And this is the big mental shift you have to make. Stop thinking of yourself as a chemist who has to follow a strict formula. Instead, think of yourself as a gardener. You're just tending to this little ecosystem in a jar. Once you start thinking that way, the whole process becomes way less stressful and, honestly, a lot more fun. So, as the gardener of this microbial farm, you have two main levers you can pull to change how your starter acts and how your bread tastes. Let's dig into the first one. This is a huge question for beginners. You see all these recipes and you wonder, do I need some kind of special, expensive flour? Well, the folks at Serious Eats did a deep dive on this exact question. And what they found is pretty cool. Different flours give your starter a totally different personality. Rye flour, for instance, gets things going the fastest and gives you this wonderful, earthy, balanced sourness. Whole wheat brings a really sharp tang and these great nutty notes. And good old all-purpose flour? It's a bit slower to the party, but it makes a really clean, mild-tasting loaf. It really just depends on what you're going for. And that's really the bottom line here. There is no one single best flour for a starter. It all comes down to what you've got in your pantry and what kind of flavor you're hoping to get in your final loaf. It's your choice. Okay, so lever number 2 is hydration. Basically, how much water you use. You can literally tune the flavor of your bread here. If you use less water and make a stiff starter, you encourage the yeast, which produces more acetic acid. That's the stuff that gives you a vinegar-like sharp tang. But if you use more water for a liquid starter, you encourage the bacteria, which make more lactic acid. That gives you a milder, more yogurt-like sourness. How cool is that? Right, so you've tended to your little ecosystem, you've picked your flour, you've dialed in the water level, and you have a happy, bubbly starter. So, how in the world do you know when it's actually ready to become bread? Don't worry, a ripe starter gives you some really clear signals. First, you'll see that it's grown a lot in the jar, often doubling or even tripling in size. You'll see bubbles all over the top and down the sides. And give it a sniff. It should smell pleasantly sour and a little fruity, not like harsh alcohol. When you give it a stir, it'll feel light and airy. That's the sweet spot. That's when it's ready to go. And this is exactly why it all matters. Using your starter when it's at its peak of activity is what gives you that amazing oven spring, that beautiful open crumb, and of course, that incredible sourdough flavor. A happy starter means a happy loaf of bread. It's that direct. Now, let's talk about something that trips a lot of people up. To keep your starter healthy, you've got to seed it. And to do that, you have to get rid of some of it first. This leftover bit is called discard, but I really want you to stop thinking of it as trash. So what is sourdough discard really? It's just the part of your starter you take out before you give it its next meal. Now, it's not active enough to raise a whole loaf of bread by itself, but it is absolutely jam-packed with complex flavor, and it still has a little bit of leavening power. Think of it as a flavor-boosting ingredient. And here is a totally brilliant, super simple way to use it. Create a discard cache. Seriously, just get another jar and stick it in the fridge. Every time you feed your starter, just dump the discard into that jar. You just keep adding to it, and by the end of the week, you'll have this amazing stash of flavor that you can add to pancakes, waffles, muffins, you name it. It's zero waste and maximum deliciousness. So, as we wrap things up here, I want to leave you with this question. After everything we've talked about, the living microbes, the choices you can make with flour and water, watching for those signs of ripeness, is a sourdough starter really just another ingredient on a list? Or is it maybe something more, like a collaboration, a partnership between you and a tiny living world in a jar? Now that is something to think about. Happy baking!